Welcome back to Fantasy and Faith, podcast that explores fantasy fiction, writing, and faith. Today, my guest is James Barclay, author of the Chronicles of the Raven, Legends of the Raven, Elves, and the Ascendants of Historia series. He's one of Britain's best heroic fantasy authors, and somebody that I've been friends with on Facebook for a long, long time. And we made the jump over to Blue Sky, and we've been talking about doing this for a while. So, hello, James. Welcome to the show. Please let my audience know a bit more about you.
Hi, yeah, it's great to be here finally after a couple of false starts, both of which were my fault. But good to be here at last anyway. Yeah, as you've so rightly said, I'm James Barclay, a now grey, not greying, but it's long gone, grey fantasy author. I've written 14 novels, a couple of novellas, innumerable short stories, and I say I'm best known probably for the Raven series, of which there are 7 books. The Elves trilogy, which is in the same world, but a long time in the past, chronologically from the Raven. Descendants of Historia is that's a Romanesque duology, if there is such a thing. And if anyone's read them, they know that they are very, very, very long. And I promise never, ever to write a book that long again. They were lovely, but sort of labours of love at the same time. Very long books are very difficult, I've discovered. And then latterly I've written a couple of standalones, which I really, really enjoyed writing. Heart of Granite and Queen's Assassin, which I expect we'll talk about a bit later. I'm currently working on some new stuff. And I've worn my most creased T-shirt I've just seen. Look at that. Look at those creases.
It's a classic Days Gone.
It is the classic day. Yes, hang on. Yeah, it's my favourite PC game by a mile. So, any chance I can take to give it a bit of up, I shall.
I was one of the fans of that game as well.
Yeah.
It got a lot of bad press, but I think it was a really good game.
Yeah, it's a great game. It has clunkiness and things that don't make sense, but it's got a lovely story, and I love the action and the way the story gets you and keeps you going. So yeah, I think it's a super game. Very unfairly treated. And we still hope for a Days Gone too, but I think we might be lucky.
Maybe. I mean, they've renewed less worthier games, so
This is
maybe
true.
Days Gone is there.
Yeah. There's always hope.
Yeah. I don't think anything beats riding around on a motorbike being chased by a horde of zombies
There really,
by
really
throwing
isn't
Molotovs over your shoulder.
There's nothing better than that sort of stuff. So yes, but some people hated it, and that's their prerogative, I guess. But I don't really understand it. But there you go.
So you've been writing now for over 2.5 decades.
Yeah, first published in 1999. That's right. Yeah,
1999. So how did it all start for you?
Oh, crumbs! It started a long time ago. Actually, I've wanted to be an author since I was 11, and I started tapping away on a typewriter upstairs in my bedroom, which was great most of the time. But some of the time, it was irritating for my mum and dad because our lounge was downstairs from my bedroom. If they had friends in, then I think they found it less good than at other times. So sometimes they think I'm spending my time very wisely rather than hanging around street corners with my mates. And then suddenly when they got friends over, it's a terrible thing. And would I mind going out and hanging around street corners with my mates? But that's where it started. Yeah. And I've never, ever resolved from that. And so I think that it's been a driving force in my life, well, for literally as long as I can remember. And I still love writing as much now as I did then, I guess. I've been very lucky to be published, very lucky to have a good career in publishing. And fantasy has come about because my brother gave me lots of fantasy books when I was young. And I think that's where I got my love of fantasy. He gave me The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings when I was far too young, and I read them anyway. Then he's given me books by Michael Moorcock and Brian Aldiss and Arthur C. Clarke back in the 70s, So my reading and writing history is very much steeped in fantasy, stroke science fiction, although I've only written one sort of sci-fi book.
Mine was the same as well. My big brother gave me lots of books that I shouldn't be reading to read. I got my first taste of David Gemmell's books.
Yes.
I think it was Ghost King.
Oh, right.
King Beyond the Gate. I
Yeah.
read those two, and I was hooked from that point onwards as well.
Yeah.
Which book was it specifically? Which author that made you want to become an author?
Well, I think, as I said, I wanted to be an author forever. I expect reading Tolkien inspired me that you could create these incredible immersive worlds if you were good enough and diligent enough. At the time, of course, I had no idea quite how much research and quite how detailed is all the background that he draws upon. But he's probably the start. But I think in terms of my style of writing and the way that I prefer pace and action and whatnot, as I think we'll probably talk about again a bit later. There's a couple of authors who I've really enjoyed. Actually, really enjoyed the novelization of Star Wars, long time ago now, in the 70s. And also, I honestly can't remember who wrote it, which is shocking, but I can't. But two authors that I would mention who've inspired me to write the way I write are Alan Dean Foster. Obviously, churned out a lot of books, some of which were okay, some of which are just utterly brilliant, and just these adventures that just drag you in, and they just do not let you go until they spit you out at the other end. But there's a particular book that I read. I'd read nothing like it before, and it's called The Legacy of Hero, and I cannot remember when that came out. But it's by Niven, Pornell, and Barnes. They all co-wrote it, and it is a magnificent novel and an absolute masterclass in how you think everything is going okay, and then there's a moment in the middle, and you read it and you go, "Oh no!" and everything turns to shit. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
It's a family show, but you can get away with that one.
I'll try not to. The odd one may slip out, but everything goes to poo. And again, the pace, the action, the characterization, the economy of description, all these sorts of things, I love it. I've read it several times just to remind myself how extremely good writers can write extremely good books. And we should all read lots of books to work out how other authors write books so we can write better books, I think.
Absolutely. I'll have to add that to my to-read list.
Yeah, you should. Everyone should.
Is it true? Yeah, everyone should. Is it true that the Raven started life as part of a Dragon Quest tabletop campaign?
It is absolutely true, yes. Yes, all the characters within the Raven, certainly in the first 3 books, they've done the central characters to the Raven were all my friends. We all sat around a table together. So yes, is the answer to that. And I was Hirad, by the way, in case you needed to know.
So how many of those? Go on.
No. You say, sorry.
So how many of those character quirks crossed over from the tabletop to page?
Quite a few. Hirad's sort of belligerence and sort of lack of understanding of simple things, I think, certainly came over. And particularly, and also Denser and his sort of deviousness and his sort of sense of mischief and sometimes malice, that certainly came over. I should tell you that in the early days, he actually betrayed a lot of us once, but we survived it and still talk to him afterwards. So, I think and obviously parts of my friends' characters as well. I mean, the guy who was the force behind the Unknown Warrior, he was a very, very efficient player of role-playing games, if I can say that, and because he would have everything mapped out, almost like a bit of a game of chess about what he was going to do and where he was going to go and how the characters were going to coalesce around him if they wanted to live, that sort of thing. And that's very much how he is in the Raven. He is their he's their brain and their muscle for quite a lot of the time. Where Hirad might be the beating heart and the soul of it all, then he is the one that they will look to in times of trouble, and that's exactly what he was like doing as a character in the game. So those ones particularly I can remember.
Yeah. Oh, when I read the first book, it's Don Thief, isn't it? The first one.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, every time I read The Unknown Warrior, I'd picture Conan in my mind.
Ah,
Big, huge, muscular.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Carries a sword like as a toothpick.
Yeah. Yes, yes. He wields a two-handed sword relatively straightforwardly for something so heavy. I'm sure I could be picked upon with how you actually use one. I've never actually swung one myself, so I had to read and try and understand. But I think strength and balance and unwavering confidence are great things when swinging round sharpened bits of metal of that length. But yes, he did. So it's not. I think, yeah. I mean, he obviously wasn't quite as all powerful as Conan, but there are similarities. Yes.
In past interviews, you've cited David Gemmell as an early inspiration as well, and
Yes.
certainly he was one of my favorite authors, as I mentioned. What concrete habits, structure, pacing, moral stakes do you take from those influences, and how do you differentiate the world of the Raven?
Oh, that's a good question. I think one of the great things about Dave's novels is that he his characters and therefore you as the reader believe literally everything that they say. Everything is done with enormous passion. We became really good friends after I'd been published, and he ended up putting quotes on my books, which is lovely of him. So we met quite a lot, and he would read passages from his books, and the way that he read them explained everything you need to know about how he approached his writing, because he would literally, if he was gathering a spell, you could see he would be doing all this stuff as he was reading, and he spoke with such passion, and he imbued all his characters and all his scenes with that passion. I don't think anyone's replicated that particularly. Everyone has their own take on it, but he was unique in that regard, in my opinion. What I tried to take from it was that not everyone can be a hero all the time. But for heroes, there is always something that can be done, which is something he used to say would help sort of inform his narratives. But even in the smallest action, you can do a great thing. And in terms of morals, it's about faith in your strength, and it's about faith in your friends, faith in your colleagues, and understanding where you lie versus your enemies, and what you can do and what you can't do in a given moment. And he was very good at wrapping his stories around those sorts of actually quite simple structures. And those are the sort of things that I've tried to use if I can. What I try to do in the Raven, because this is why I like the group dynamic of the Raven, is of course they're not individually heroic. The 7 of them, or the 6, or the 8, however many of them there are at a given time, depending on who's lived, died, joined, or left. They're a hero as a group, and the dynamic, which, because they can bicker and they can banter, and they can fall out really seriously about things. But what they will do is when in a moment of stress and conflict, they will bring themselves together to work as only they know how, as a single heroic construct, if you like. So it's that sort of thing, and it all circles around Dave's understanding of heroism. I think probably that's really what I've gained from lots of his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they called it heroic fantasy, didn't they?
Yeah,
So it's almost like
yeah,
he
there's
carved
good
his
reason
own
in this
niche.
case. Yes. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
have a favorite of his books?
Crumbs. I mean, I don't
Your
know.
favorite character?
There are so many that are so good. Because I even loved his last books, the Odysseus trilogy, Lord of the Silver Bow, and those 3 books. I actually haven't read the last one because I refuse to, because then it means there's no more David Gemmell to read, and that'll be bad. So I haven't read it. I guess it's actually kind of hard to look past the first books, from when Waylander and Legend and The King Beyond the Gate. Those are the first of his that I read, and I utterly, utterly loved Waylander. There was a real transporting book. He was a fantastic character. I mean, and Druss in Legend, very, very different style of hero, a very kind of straight down the line hero, if you like. And Waylander was not. He was far more morally grey, but still heroic in terms of his actions and his, and his treatment of others and his hatred of evil and blah blah, all the stuff that you'd expect from a David Gemmell novel. So it's probably Waylander, honestly. I guess, but that's the book that's probably had the most impact on me, I would think.
I agree with you that his last trilogy, The Lord of Silverborn, all those, that was probably some of his best writing. But
The writing
I
is
think
superb.
because, yeah, King Beyond the Gate with Tanaka Khan and that the
Yeah.
Granite saga, because it's not
Yes.
really a trilogy, it's just events happening in the same world over different periods.
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so those stuck with me. My brothers like Legend, and they like also they like the Skilganon books.
Oh yeah.
Those were
Yeah.
really good too.
Really good. I mean, there isn't a Duff Gemmell book. That's the thing. So you take your pick. So he was very, very good.
How much would you say of that kind of heroic fantasy has been pulled into the Raven as well? So moving on from Gamble as the kind of taking on heroic fantasy as a subgenre.
Yeah. I mean, quite a lot, I would say. And particularly, I mean, given sort of my love of Waylander and the influences of that book, the moral greyness of my heroes, I think there's a lot of that. I mean, none of these people are in the Raven are perfect. I mean, they have their code, but when does killing become murder? I mean, you can ask yourself that question in quite a lot of the Raven novels, I guess. But in their belief in themselves and in their belief that they're the only people that can do the thing to save the world, if it's the world that needs saving. I mean, that's not always the case, but it's about how I would notch up. It's notching up the stakes, which is what he was also extremely good at. When you think you're getting close to the end and you've got time to fulfill the quest, suddenly the time is shortened. It might be halved because something else happens. So then you add a whole lot more pace and tension. And he was exceptionally good at doing that, just dropping it in and then almost like scaring the reader into thinking, "Oh no." So those is sort of techniques like that I've tried to bring in, I think. And also the implacability of foes as well. I do try and get into the minds of the enemies, and I'm not trying to explain them or justify their actions, but you need to understand their drive, or else what are they doing? Because it's not. I don't believe in people being evil for evil's sake. There needs to be a reason why they want what they want, and it might be they want to own the world or whatever. But almost, why do they even want that? It's a good question. It's a big thing to manage, a whole world.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said earlier about moral gray areas and villains having some kind of motivating factor. Because
Yes.
people don't wake up in the morning and say, "You know what, I'm going to be a villain today." They're going to think in the brain and say, "Today I'm going to take over the world."
Yeah, that is
So
true.
they have to have a reason for the actions, and the big secret is that bad guys always think of themselves as good guys. I'm sure Donald Trump thinks he's saving the world right now.
Yeah. Yes. Saving the world by invoking World War III. Excellent. Yes. Good. Yes.
Absolutely.
Good plan, Donald. Yes. Yes.
Well done.
Yes.
So your SF site interview highlighted your love of dialogue and economy to drive pace.
Yes.
So when you're drafting a Raven battle or argument, do you script it out like a play first, or do you just let the action lead the conversation?
I don't. I just write them. I think I remember I did once script a battle because I wanted a specific outcome from it, and when I'd written it, based on the things that I'd done, it was like a dance. And although people can say, "Oh, yes, fighting is like dancing," well, fighting is mostly, I think, with swords and magic is brutal and quick, and it's not dancing. But I think what you can do if you choreograph it too carefully, then it isn't real. It comes over as forced and fake. And so I, for me anyway. So what I will do in a fight is I will know the outcome I want from the fight. I know who's coming into the fight. I know who's going out of the fight alive, and I'll just let it happen, and we'll see. And I might end up drafting it a few times to get the action and the tension right, and all the points of view right. But I don't believe in scripting them, and I don't do that with conversation either, because if you do that, again, I think your conversation, anyone's conversation can go off in any direction at any time, and that's the nature of conversation. And you can tell a scripted conversation because it drives itself towards the thing that the author wants the reader to know. And sometimes, a lot actually, I get into conversations and you discover halfway through that you've gone off on a complete tangent, but you've got to let it go because that's people. And you can maybe circle back to it later, or maybe it's a different conversation. Maybe it's a different scene that you have to write that brings the information in that you actually want. But I feel you have to let these things grow organically. And I think also that allows space for things like humor, because you'll write a line and there's an obvious retort to the line, and sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's angry. I've had conversations which have ended up being quite amusing. I've had some which have ended up in arguments that I wasn't expecting, but why not? For me, that makes them more real, more credible. So never script them. I don't. Anyway.
So if you were to write the Raven today, let's say fresh start, you just started writing the Raven.
Yeah.
Would you think it would cross over into Grimdark, because your battle scenes are quite gritty?
I don't know. It's a good question. Probably because it's quite a prevalent style of fantasy, and my Joe Abercrombie, who's done brilliant work in Grimdark, particularly good exponent of that, and he used to call me Grim Light. I don't know if he still does. Who knows? Probably it'd probably be darker than it is, I would say, but I don't think I'd go. I'm not sure that I'm built to write that sort of grim, bleak, endless misery stuff that I know some people are extremely good at and love to write. And I do have that in my books, but it doesn't. I like levity and I like lighter moments. And that's not to say that Joe doesn't write humor. He writes humor really nicely in his books, but and other grimdark writers. He's not the only one, of course. Other authors are available, but he's. But I'm not built that way, I don't think. If I do one, I'll let you know.
Yeah. I tend to struggle with Grimdark as well. It's good. The action scenes are really good and everything, but you need a little bit of light in there just to give the reader hope that not everyone's going to die. And
right.
something good might happen before the
Yes.
end of it.
Even if they all end
quite
up
heavy
dying,
to read.
Yes. No, yes, that's kind of where I like to go as well. Yeah.
So, other than the Unknown Warrior, Dence is one of my favorite characters with Chronicles of Raven. His arc from cynical Zeteskian to core Raven member is, I think, one of the things that fans really like about your books.
I think so.
Which real-world experiences or literary archetypes helped you chart the shift without softening his edges?
In the end, I think he's quite a pragmatist. And although I hope I'm not spoiling anyone's enjoyment of my 1999 debut, but he uses the Raven to get what he wants in the first novel to quite a large extent. It turns out it's good that he did, or else the world would have ended. But they are a handy vehicle for him. And once they're trapped inside the adventure, the quest, there is no getting out of it. But I think what I tried to do with him is, as you see in friendship groups and in people who start disliking each other, like in, I don't know, like in buddy cop movies, for instance, when they great like hell to start with and come the end they're best buddies. I think there's elements where the more you're with people who aren't like you, the more some of your rougher edges might get knocked off and softened. And I think that's what's happened with him, that he surprises himself when he ends up caring for them. And although it affects him because it actually makes him a little bit more cautious in some of the later books, he's less keen to do stuff which he would have done earlier, because he doesn't care if they live or die as long as he lives. He becomes no longer like that. I think you can argue it's just like a growing relationship, in that that he finds out that they're not just vessels for the things he wants to get done. These are people that are invested in maintaining the world in which they live in, and in succeeding in their world saving exploits. I think they do quite a lot, and he wants to be part of it rather than someone on the outside of it using them to get where he wants, and he finds it a better way to live. So I don't know if those are archetypes or tropes. I think moving from everything's an argument and everything's cynical to everything's a bit more considered and reasoned is a way that is quite a lot of sort of gritty relationships can end up, I guess. I've had some, so why not? I think that's where he gains a lot of his strength and belief from, is in when he starts to invest in what the Raven actually is, and in their ethos and in their self-belief as a group. It helps him to bring himself into them, and rather than act as just an individual.
I mean, when you wrote the first book, people weren't really writing mercenary crews. You'd have the sole hero, and there'll be a few people around them. So I'd see the Raven is kind of a front runner for that kind of story. So faith, loyalty, and chosen family run throughout the Raven books. When you're building a mercenary company's creed, how consciously do you weave their beliefs, religious or otherwise, into the way what shapes their character decisions? And where do you prefer subtext over explicit lore?
I mean, there isn't. I mean, the Raven don't have an explicit law apart from this code to kill but never murder. That's how they like to operate. I think just. But by the way, I think that probably the first guy to do mercenaries would be Den Cook, the Black Company, who was before me. I don't know if you've read any of those. They're very good, worth looking at. I think that when I was building the Raven, it's all based on love and trust and faith in one another. And I wouldn't say that's virtually a religious thing or a creed thing. It's something which has developed over time, because when you first meet them, they've been together for 10 years. So they've grown up together, and they're growing old together, and they have an innate understanding of how each other works. And so they operate within a sphere where they have such an understanding of what each other's strengths are, that it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like a soccer team that understands where everyone's going to be on the pitch at any one time. So if you pass the ball out to the wing, your number 7 is going to be out there waiting to pick it up, and they're a little bit like that. But they'll expect Ilkar to cast his defensive spells so that to drive back other spells. They'll expect the Unknown Warrior to tap his sword before they get into the fight to give them their timing. They expect their line to work and never to break. And these things, I guess, they're all rooted in faith. I mean, absolute faith in one another. And it's the faith that breeds the loyalty. Then this unwavering trust they have, which is why they have a problem with Denser at the start, because he's not trustworthy. And he has to earn that. So I didn't consciously bring in faith in a religious sense, but I brought in faith in terms of humans believing in one another. And it was kind of as simple as that, I guess. because I think we operate better as humans when we are working as one, working in trust and working in faith with each other. And that's how I built them. And I think that does show, by the way, when new people join, they're not quite sure who they are. When Ariane joins, they find her attitude quite odd because she doesn't understand them and they don't understand her. And the same when the elven archer Ren joins in a later book, I think in Elf Sorrow, she's she fights with them before she becomes a member of them effectively. Again, they're unsure what she can do. They're unsure if she's going to do the right thing. They're unsure if she's loyal. And all these create slightly small conflicts and tensions, which are actually quite useful as an author. Because that's when things can go wrong and someone doesn't do what they're expected to do. So it's kind of like that. Does that make any sense at all? Oh, good. Mm, yeah. This is quite a long time ago now, you see. So I'm a very old man. That's tricky stuff. What I think I wanted to do was I didn't want a singular magic. I didn't want a singular magic because then it would have upset the rebirth of the one magic later, because that would have completely undermined book 3 of the trilogy. So, and what I wanted was to have colleges that were based in particular sorts of law, whether it was sort of aggressive and inquisitive like Zetesk, or more I don't know, it's not delicate is the wrong word completely, but more sort of learned and calm and wholesome, like a Julatza, and I put Dordover in the middle. And I can't remember the fourth college's name now. It began with E. Do you remember it? I don't. Anyway, that one. That's one that was it didn't play a massive part because it was rather dominated by Ilkar and Denser, and of course there's one from Julatza, one from Zetesk there, so they were more prevalent in terms of the colleges. And but then what it meant was I could then discuss how they had effectively splintered from the one magic whenever that was, way back in the past, and taken up their own laws and to work themselves magic in different ways. So that was why. Yes, it's that. I think I don't want to have like reams and reams of notes of everything. I'd rather include it as it's needed. But one thing, but then I do well. We'll make notes then if I decide that Julatza can do something, or they have a certain piece of law which says they can do A but not B. I need to know that, because I can then, once I've put it in the page, I can't step outside it. So you have to remain credible within the rules that you create, in the way that the whole magic system has to stay credible within the rules it creates. You can't just invent stuff, bring in stuff just to get you out of a hole. You have to work with what you've got, and that makes it a lot more fun and more difficult to write. So no, I don't. Not for anything really. I'll do basic character sketches, and I'll do quite basic world sketches and terrains and whatnot. But I'm not going to do a whole 6-month research project to gather everything together, because for me, certainly the temptation would be to get it all in the book. It would make the book really slow and turgid, so I'd rather not do that. But that does mean there is a risk in that, by the way, because it can mean, and I was picked up on this by my editor quite a few times, in that it can leave some parts of it looking a bit thin, where you've kind of glossed over stuff which is quite important because you actually haven't written the background to why it might be happening. So sometimes you have to go back on an edit and then introduce something so the reader knows what the hell you're talking about. I think that is also important. So it's a balance, and balance is hard in novels, to be fair. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, but I mean, keeping the credibility and the coherence was quite a challenge. Yes, but it's really enjoyable to do. Um, things like losing characters is extremely hard. And I've got a lot of emails I could send you with people very unhappy about certain character deaths. But nothing I can do about that. But there we go.
So moving on to the Elves trilogy, you reframe familiar fantasy races with rainforest culture, long memory, and internal divisions. What research, which you already said you don't do that much beforehand, or world history analogs do you draw on to make Calais and the Tagathan feel lived in rather than Tolkien by another name?
Um, that's another good question. I actually did a little bit of research because I needed to read about what rainforests are like, and it's slightly rainforest light in that it's not as impenetrable as some rainforests I know, but it needed to be workable. But the vegetation and the density of vegetation and sort of the endless rain and it being rainforest, you'd expect that. And what I like the idea of is an ancient race of human hating sort of ninja elves, really. They're like SAS elves, I suppose, determined to defend their own land, and being extremely good at it as well. I didn't want my elves to be. I mean, they are long lived, but I didn't want them to be effective immortals. I didn't want them to be. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of Tolkien's elves, but I needed to be very different from those. So they are. So the Taigethan in particular are hyper aggressive and very doughty defenders, and very, very, very strong in the belief in the right they have to protect their own land. I mean, I'm sure we could all say that we'd all be like that, but they have the ability to actually do it, and their reluctance to step outside of it, and their reluctance to treat with humans in any way apart from to put them on the end of a blade or a spear or an arrow, I think to begin with sets them well apart from any other elf that I've read about. I'm not sure there are some who are like this, but they needed to be quite dark. They needed to be exceptionally fast, exceptionally talented. But don't forget the Taigethan, for instance, they're the top of the heap of elves. I mean, a lot of elves in my world are good at magic and they're good at fighting, but the Taigethan are something different. They don't use magic at all, and they don't really have to. They're all like Bruce Lee on steroids. And I think that sets them apart from a Tolkien elf for me. But I didn't set out to make them different. Just that's who I wanted them to be, and they were different. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because whenever you use a standard fantasy trope like elves, you will immediately be compared to Tolkien, who kind of did it first. Although not, I could go back to the King of Elfland's Daughter if you want, but I mean, that's a very, very long time ago. But the first person to popularize the elven race and the dwarven race, for that matter, in novels was again, I could be wrong, but for me it was Tolkien. So there is a part of you, perhaps subconsciously, that really doesn't want them to go, you see, it's a bit like Elrond, that guy, or something like that. That would be disappointing. But I don't think anyone's ever done that with mine, so that's good.
You once described the Heart of Granite as a deliberate shift, almost future fantasy, even if it's shelved elsewhere in Waterstones and Barnes and Noble. What itch were you scratching that Balea couldn't, and what, if anything, from Raven process survived that genre jump?
Quite a lot survived the process in the terms of process, because it's still fast, it's still based in its dialogue and its character and its action. It's set outside of all that because that's where the story needed to be, and it's really as simple as that. It was an idea that came out of, I don't know if you want me to, I know you know about this. It was very bizarre how it came out, because we were on holiday, and I think we were in Switzerland with our then really quite young son. We've got two boys now, and they're like nearly 19 and 14 and a half, but at this time we had one and he was about 3. And we were up early, or he was up early, so I got up because it was my turn. And I'd bought him this airport map to keep him busy. And it had planes you could land on it and barriers you could put up, and something that would like steps up to an aircraft, that's all those sorts of things you could drive onto it. But he'd also brought with him a few sort of other figures and toys, and one of them was a dragon. And at one stage he picked up this dragon and he just landed it on the runway. I went, oh, commercial dragon flights, how funny. And that's where it started. And then years and years and years later, it became a 23rd century novel about war on land, and all the oil and gas resources have all gone, and people fight from within kilometre-long iguana-style lizards, and fly dragon-like, effectively fighters. I mean, they're the dragon equivalent of fighter aircraft, and they actually have a pilot inside them that melds with the dragon so that they can fly, and that's where it came from. But it needed to be high tech as opposed to medieval. It wasn't going to work in a medieval or fantasy style setting. So that's why it ended up being where it was. And I wanted to put it on Earth, and I wanted it to be able to have guns, and I wanted to be able to have more modern style dialogue. I was really itching to do something like that and not be sort of kind of constrained. Though my books are quite sweary at times, so I wanted to not be constrained by a medieval style language where you can't reference technologies that haven't been invented, obviously. Which, if I said it in the 23rd century, I can reference whatever I like, and so I did. And I think it really worked. I loved that book. Absolutely love it.
So have other mundane moments kicked off a spark of a new character or plot thread?
Yeah, there's one I'm not going to talk about too much because I don't want to give it away because I've not written it yet. But yes, there is one where I saw a shadow falling on something and thought, oh, you see, that's X, Y, Z. And that has sparked off a thing, which I'll talk to you about offline, if you like, because I'd be interested in your views. But it sparked off, and it's the most mundane thing. But it like indicates a time of day. I can say that much. Indicates a certain time of day at a certain time of year when the shadow would fall here, across that building. And it gave me an answer to a question that had been knocking around in the back of my head. And hopefully I'm going to write that book this year. We will see. It's quite a project. It's going to be it's contemporary. So not something I'm really used to, so we'll try it out.
Process-wise, when an idea like that lands, what do you do? Do you carry a notebook around, or just a mental note?
Yeah, I write it down, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do a voice note on the phone, or I used to keep a notebook by my bed, but luckily I don't tend to wake up with ideas anymore. That's probably a benefit of age. I used to wake up with them quite a lot back in the day, not so much now. But yes, I don't, because I have made the mistake of thinking I'll remember that, and then you don't. But I think you probably have to have faith that if it's a good enough idea, it'll come back at some stage. But it's safest just to scribble it down as a memento of your thought. So I think that's wise advice for everyone. Like a shopping list, you see, of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I make notes on my phone. I'll keep a little notebook on my desk.
Always worth it.
because you never know. Sometimes Barry's dead on the phone, or you've left it in a different room, and you need to get the idea down.
Yeah, yeah. I have pens in every coat pocket, so can always write something somewhere.
So your official bibliography now includes The Queen's Assassin, published 2021. What craft
Yes,
lessons? Yeah,
yeah, a long
yeah.
time ago now.
It feels like a while now, doesn't it? What craft lessons from writing that book, voice structure or theme, are you carrying into your next project?
Well, not a lot, because it was designed very much as a standalone fantasy, and the book that's with my agent at the moment is contemporary young adult, although it has mysticism within it and abilities and whatnot, so it carries fantasy with it. But that book, that was I was actually, funny enough, that wasn't one of those where an idea just popped into my head and went, oh, that'd be good. The Queen's Assassin came because I was actually trying to think of ideas. I just wanted to pitch some ideas and see what my editor liked the best, and it came out of that process, which I don't do very often, funnily enough. I haven't had to, because ideas have already been sitting there, but I didn't actually have something I wanted to present to her, but and I wanted to have 3 or 4, and this one sprang up because it had a difference in that everything had to be hidden, and it was about people. I mean, it is at its heart a Brexit analogy, because it's about people acting against their own interests. I'm sorry if I'm upsetting people that voted to leave, but
I don't think any of them watch.
No, probably not. Don't like lefties like me, I'm sure, or you. So it was, and it wasn't just that, but it also dealt with the pandemic, bizarrely, and I wrote it before COVID, and I was actually doing the editing with when COVID struck, which was quite odd thing to do. But I wanted to focus on a single person who wasn't a fighting person. She never picks up a sword. She never kills anyone, and yet she is one of the best heroes that I've ever written, because of the power of her character. And again, so I'll tell you what you can. I might brought into that from the Raven is her belief and her faith that things will become right in the end, and her trust in the people that she gathers around her. And there's a character in that book who I didn't expect to become an ally, because he's an enemy to begin with. And that's the more extreme version of someone like Denta, I guess, in that he starts off wanting her dead and ends up needing her to win, which I thought was a good thing. But I don't think it's really necessary. It hasn't really informed the next project, that one. This one, because actually this one I've written that's with my agent is something that I first had the idea for back in 2010, I think. But I hadn't found a vehicle for it until now, the right way to approach it. And it's written in first person present, which is different for me. A whole different challenge in terms of writing. But I really enjoyed it because it makes the text immediate. It makes the story very immediate. And I've loved doing that. Anyway, that's something that isn't published yet, so I can't go into too much detail.
What led to that decision to switch from third person to first?
I felt that the book wasn't working at an individual level in terms of my characters as well as it might. So each chapter is from the point of view of a different character, and there are 3 main characters, and I needed to be inside their heads. So first person present and reacting in the moment, and reacting to the thing you've just heard or just seen, and being able to almost describe I think more accurately how people are feeling about what they're experiencing. I found it a better vehicle, first person present on this occasion. But and if it gets a publisher and I write more, then they will also all be in first person present. The exciting thing is I'm currently writing a short story for an anthology, and that's in third person. And it has been horrible to try and switch out a first person present back into third person. And I'm going through it now. I'm doing some editing on it now, and there are so many bits of first person that have crept in. It's very, to start with, I couldn't think of it. I couldn't think how to write it at all. I couldn't get any of the tenses right, and all the phrasing was all wrong. But in the end, I slipped back in. But it's funny because I've never written anything in first person present before, and so I thought it would be easy just to pop back into what I'd always written, but no, it was not so. So beware.
So I've had the similar challenge switching from academic writing back to writing fiction, and so writing is really clunky. So I've decided to do 3 books.
Yeah.
They're quite short novella length books, but doing 3 books, one after the other, first drafts, so that by the time I finished writing the third one, I should have fixed out taken out all the bad habits I've picked up being an academic writer.
Yeah. Yes. There you go.
I hope so.
I hope so.
What does your writing process look like?
I mean, it used to be quite chaotic. The Raven novels were written really off the top of my head, the first 2 or 3 certainly. I used to be quite good at it because I could keep everything in my head. I'd have vague ideas about, well, no, not vague. I know exactly who started the novel, exactly who was coming out at the other end, and I'd have an arc of the book. I'd have some key events I knew were going to happen, and I just wrote it. And it's a bit sort of seat of your pants. And I mean, quite a few authors do this, I think, seat of your pants stuff. But I can't do that now. I've fallen out of love with that way of approaching a novel because it feels too chaotic now. And maybe that's experience, maybe that's age, maybe I just don't hold that many thoughts in my head all at once anymore because I don't want to, life goes on, I've got no family and dogs. And when I first started writing, I was living in a room in a rented house. So you don't have so many demands on your time, literally, and on your headspace. I never want to go back to living in a room in a rented house, by the way, because that'd be horrible. But, I kind of enjoyed it, but not now. I mean, I have a family, and I could never get. That's the best thing that ever happened. Is actually, funnily enough, that just a little aside, having a family and having animals has given a whole different perspective to my life, which I have brought into my writing. Now, my wife and I have been married for 20 and a half years now, which seems like a long time, but it's whipped by, but it's taught me so much more about life and the fullness of life and the joy you can get from life than I ever had when I was single. So I recommend it thoroughly to anyone. Sorry, anyway, so I was talking about my writing process. So now it's I will plan more in more detail. I don't map out every scene, because I find that I don't follow it anyway. Because things happen, characters say something that you weren't expecting, as I was talking about before, and off you go down a different rabbit hole. But I will have a much closer idea on where the peaks and troughs of a narrative are going to be, where I need to slow it down, where I need to pick up the pace, and much more about who the characters are and how I want them to develop through the novel to the end. So from that point of view, I do an awful lot more structural planning before I start. But I'm sure I do nowhere near as much as some people that love to know everything about the novel before they even write a word. But I think in the end, and this has evolved over time. Of course, it's evolved from when I first drafted Dawnleaf and the other Raven novels, and you end up in the place that works for you at that moment. I think one of the things that stopped me doing the seat of the pants writing is when I was writing the first Elves novel, I'd written about 60,000 words, and I had this nagging feeling that it wasn't quite what I wanted in terms of its pace and in terms of its characters and that sort of thing. So I went back and read the whole thing. I ended up scrapping it all and starting again because it was turgid. It really, really was. It was really slow, and I did not like it at all. And I thought about, can I rescue it? Can I rescue bits and pieces out of it? And I thought, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try and edit what I've got. So I just pushed it to the side. I use it as a reference point, Rather, I wrote the whole thing all over again with a bit more idea about where actions occur and through the novel and where slower points occur, and it made the whole thing an awful lot better. So that's where I've got to, and that's how I write now. How do you write? How do you do it?
I started off a lot like you, had the whole story in my head, and then just wrote draft after draft until it was ready. Um, Over the years,
Yeah.
I kind of do a loose chapter outline, but I leave the last few chapters alone, because, as you said, things start changing, and I don't want to know the ending until I get there. I have with my current projects, I know what's going to happen at the end now, but I don't I
Yeah.
don't plan that out. I've written a bit of lore for one of my works in progress, um, just
Cool.
because I want that world to feel brand new, but also slightly lived in as well. So I felt like if I gave it some lore as well, it would help the characters. The story set 1,000 years after the lore is is set, but that's like a genesis story for that planet. Um,
Yeah.
and then I
Cool.
occasionally look at the chapter outline to say, okay, where are you now? Where are you going to next? Especially when I get stuck, it
Yeah.
helps them more than anything else. But I think David Green from the Fantasy Society described it as waypoints. So you give yourself waypoints and
Right.
you work
Yes.
your way through that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I like that. Very nice. Well, one thing I could mention is that, and I still write like this to this day, is I was asking Dave Gemmell how he approached a day's writing, and what he always did was to write. He would write one scene. He would try and write, say, 2,000 words in a day. So he'd write a scene, but he wouldn't stop at the end of the scene. He would then start tomorrow's scene, because he said that would then give him impetus. So he's not. It's like you don't start cold when you sit down. You've got a couple of 300 words of the next scene already there, and you read that, and it gives you like a little kickstart into the scene you're writing that day, and it works really well. It does for me anyway. So that's what I try and do.
Do you have any other advice for new writers about, from your years of experience, what would really help them?
Well, I mean, in terms of unpublished authors, I guess it's old stuff really, but never giving up. I mean, you need to. We've been talking about belief and faith. You need to believe in your own writing and have faith in your own ability, but you also need to understand that you can always be better. So obviously, trying to work out why your scene isn't working, referring to your favorite author's work to see how you're not copying them, but to find maybe some inspiration in how they would drive a scene from the first beat to the last beat. Always important. And I think, apart from the always writing down ideas and being prepared, I think, to deviate from your plan. I think that's one of the things that worked for me, particularly in terms of characters appearing to be sort of credible and real, and in terms of their growth, is that in a conversation or in an action that they're having, it might occur to you that they would do something different, and that would be different to the plan you've just set up for yourself. You need to let them do it, and then you have to see where it takes you, and it can make things very, very different. In the Ascendants of Esteria, there is a character in there who's basically the head taxman, and I designed him as a bit part player, and he ended up being one of the key driving forces of both novels. Because as soon as he appeared on the page, it was like, this guy's brilliant. I love the way this guy approaches stuff. I love his attitude. I love his character, and you need to let them loose, which can be hard to do. But I think sometimes you just have to say, okay, this guy's going to change the way parts of this novel are going to work. But it can still, your entire novel can still be the beautiful thing that you imagined and you're trying to create. But it may be that some of the people in it are different from the ones you expected to be in it at certain times or in key positions. So I would say definitely in terms of dialogue and in terms of where action leads you, it's a tough thing to do, I think, and maybe it comes with experience, but just letting it go. Let it develop and see what happens. If you hate it, you can delete it and start again. But often it's the best writing you do, I've found.
Thank you very much.
So
Thank you.
that.
Where can people find you online, and what are you currently working on?
Right, so I'm on. I do have a website, but I don't really update it, to be fair, because I'm extremely lazy and terrible at WordPress. There are probably better models out there these days. I don't know, but I need to do something about that, but I haven't. So don't go there. So I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't mentioned it now, but there you go. It's out. I'm on Blue Sky and Threads as Barculator, Barculator. It's been my handle ever since one of my workmates back when I worked in the city called me that for reasons I can't remember now. But there you go. It's stuck. Used to be on X, but like many of us, gave it up when it became a total hellhole. But that's where I am mostly. I know I should be better on maybe on some other sites, but I don't know. I don't tend to invest a lot of time. As I said to you before, Sally, when I've not replied to you for 2 weeks, it's because I'm often not online at all because I get sidetracked and an hour disappears or 2 hours disappear. So, but that's where to find me.
It's a bit like using an Ansible, communicating with you through social media.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's the way to go. Yeah, and currently I am working on. I say I'm finishing off a short story I'm doing for a Gemmell anthology, which is being edited by the magnificent Ian Waits. I do not know when it's coming out. I just know I have to get my story in by the end of January. So that's something that I'm doing. And then after that, hopefully the book I've got with my agent will come back with all the rude comments on it about how to make it better, and I can make that better. And then we can go and seek a publisher. The two things I've got planned are a screenplay and this book about the shadow and the time of day and that thing. I'm hoping to do both of those this year, and we will see. But we will see, because if the stuff that I've written that my agent has takes off quickly, then I'll be in the weeds of that, doing a sequel to that. So, but time will tell.
Are you allowed to talk about the film?
I guess. No.
No.
No, I don't want to, because I don't want to jinx it. But I love the idea. I'll talk to you about it offline.
Okay, thank you very much, James. Thank you for taking the time.
No, absolute pleasure, man. Absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And for everyone watching, keep dreaming, keep writing, let your stories shine.